Welcome to Introducing the Intercultural Effectiveness Scale with Dr. Joyce Osland. She's the Executive Director of the Global Leadership Advancement Center, and she's the Lucas and Dab Professor of Global Leadership at San Jose State University, and she's a Senior Partner at the COSI Group. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Joyce.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here today to explain the IES, which is one of my favorite instruments. And I like this instrument so much because I think it's so important that we can help people prepare for global careers or for study abroad or any kind of trip abroad or for dealing with any kind of difference, even if it's domestic difference. As you see here, 92% of employers are looking for personality traits that are enhanced by study or training abroad, such as tolerance, confidence, problem-solving skills, curiosity, and knowing your strengths and weaknesses, and decisiveness. Taking the IES goes a long way toward helping us realize our strengths and weaknesses with respects to working across cultures and dealing with difference. This was created by a group of scholars who, first of all, created a longer instrument that measured 16 dimensions. Universities then asked them to create a shorter and less extensive version that could be used more readily in universities and who are studying abroad. But it's also used in government, it's used in nonprofit, and of course it's used in business. So the way this was first developed was that these same professors looked at all the research from all over the world on expatriate effectiveness. And it wasn't just business expatriates. It was all kinds of people who went overseas for any reason. And they came up with three main categories of competencies that made some people successful and other people not successful. And then, of course, they looked at these competencies through the perspective of global leadership and intercultural competence, and finally settled on 6 dimensions for this instrument. This is an example of competency research. And by that we mean that people look at who are the best people at doing something, study them, and they try to figure out why are those people better than others. So, and then, of course, you train people to be like that. You select people to be like that, which leads me to my favorite description of competency research. I try to teach a chicken to climb a tree when you can hire a squirrel. Now, fortunately, we know a lot about developing people to be better at working abroad. So this is not a hopeless cause, but it's good to know where you start out. And then we think we have some good ways to help people improve their performance, despite where they come out on their IES. So these are the 3 areas that came out as a result of that enormous literature review. First of all, learn and understand effectively. What that means is that when people are in a different culture or a different setting that's very diverse for them, that they're able to learn what's going on and quickly adapt. And they're also able to make an accurate analysis of what's going on that isn't biased by their own views. Secondly, they're very good at managing relationships effectively. They get along with people, they can connect with people, and fortunately, that means that they have more that they can learn about the other setting because people are willing to explain it to them. Thirdly, we have managing yourself effectively in challenging situations. It's not always easy to live in another country. I myself have lived in 7 countries for almost 15 years, and it was always challenging to figure out what was going on. It can be stressful, and there are things that you just have to get over and keep moving. But it's also a wonderful adventure. So these are the 3 areas that the IES really measures overall. Now, when I give examples in this talk, I'm going to use the idea of going to work or live in another country as the particular context. The IES is used in many different contexts, but I want to use this one as my particular reference point here today. So the IES, as I said, measures three main dimensions of intercultural adaptability: continuous learning, interpersonal engagement, and hardiness, which relate to the previous. Each of these dimensions has two subdimensions. In continuous learning, we're concerned about exploration. In interpersonal engagement, we're concerned about world orientation and relationship development. And finally, in the third and final factor or bucket, we're concerned about hardiness and positive regard and resilience. And then people who take this instrument also get an overall IES score that's generated by combining all these scores in the 6 dimensions. So this is what your result sheet looks like. You get back the results package for your instrument. So as I go along and explain each one of those dimensions in greater depth, I'd like you to rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 7. So 1 would be low and 7 would be very high. Continuous learning. This has to do with how you engage the world around you, and it influences your success in diverse and intercultural contexts. So this tells us how well people who are trying to learn new things, because we know people that do that are more successful. It's a matter of continuously learning. And it differentiates between people who are satisfied with what they already know and people who are really driven to know more. It has these 2 dimensions, subdimensions, which I'll explain next. Self-awareness is the first. This means that you're aware of your personal strengths. You know what areas you have to improve. You know what your interpersonal style is and your behavioral. But you also know how these impact other people. So it's one thing to know something about yourself. It's another thing to have stopped and taken into consideration how that influences people around you. And it also measures the degree to which you reflect on this knowledge in order to be, I would say, to be more successful, but also to develop yourself and to continue learning. Exploration is the next subdimension. This means how open are you to understanding new things? Are you fundamentally inquisitive and curious about other cultures and other peoples? And are you willing to actually seek out new experiences? Or do you continue doing your normal routine no matter what country you're living in? It also has to do with our ability to learn from mistakes. So if we think about people who are sent to other countries for whatever reason, if they're not self-aware, they won't understand why they feel the way they do, why they're reacting the way they do. And if they're not good at exploration, they probably won't learn very much and will be more likely to hang out with people who are just like them and not really venture out of their safety zone. The next bucket is interpersonal engagement. This factor assesses your interest in people who are different. So this factor also concerns the development of positive interpersonal relations, because we know that's just crucial. When I worked overseas, I learned very quickly that people wouldn't do things for me or work well with me unless I had a good relationship with them first. So this factor has 2 dimensions: world orientation and relationship development. World orientation is really cosmopolitanism. How much effort have we exerted into learning about other cultures and the people that lived in them? And it's really a matter of effort. Sometimes international students will say to me, Joyce, I don't understand why I have a low result in world orientation. I traveled with my parents on vacation. I'm here in another country studying. So I should be high on this. Well, the answer to that is all those things that the student described are good, but they don't necessarily reflect the personal effort that he or she put into to learning from this or seeking out this world orientation themselves. This isn't something we necessarily inherit. It's about how much effort we put out to learn these things. And it's also about not being parochial in our views. So when we look at relationship development, then how do we learn as a result of engaging those people? Do we ask them questions? Do they like us enough to explain things to us? And how willing are we to make the hard effort of learning another language so that we can actually speak to people in their own language? All of these determine our result in relationship development. Now, the last factor is hardiness. How we manage our thoughts and emotions in environments where people believe and act differently than we do. And what is our tendency to get upset or stressed or frustrated or even angry when we run into situations or anything really that is different than we're used to? And of course, when that happens, how well do we manage our emotions? Do we do it constructively and learn from failures and setbacks? Or do we lose our temper, ruin our relationships, and become even more embedded in that initial negative view about others? So this factor has two dimensions: positive regard and emotional resilience. Positive regard has to do with non-judgmentalism, but it also has to do with assuming the best about people, being more accepting of different behaviors. People who are high in positive regard are very, very slow to make negative stereotypes about other cultures or other people. They give them the benefit of the doubt, and they don't assume that everyone is a certain way, that one snippet of behavior that we see from someone means that they are completely a certain way or a certain stereotype. The last dimension is emotional resilience. This measures our level of emotional strength and our ability to cope with challenging emotional experiences. And in particular, measures how quickly we get over things and move on. I don't care where you go or what you do in terms of diversity or other cultures, something is going to happen. You're going to have a negative experience. Then it's a matter of really trying to figure it out, manage your own emotions, and move on rather than obsessing about it for so long that it ruins the rest of your experience. Now, what I'm showing you here is a group report. This is a sample group report. So here you see everyone's results, and look down at the bottom, we have an overall intercultural effectiveness scale result, and we have, for example, 6 people in the low column, the very low, the moderately low column, we have 3, and so forth, on up to the high percentiles on the right. These results are portrayed in the form of percentiles because this is an area where it's difficult to know what a perfect score would be. So in social science, what we do is we compare our results to other people's results, and then that places us in a particular percentile compared to them. I'm sure you've taken some kind of test in school where your results came back as a percentile. So this means that your results in a particular dimension, say self-awareness, were first of all averaged, but then that average was compared to everybody else in the database. There are over 90,000 people in the database now. Then your results for self-awareness and exploration were again compared to everyone else in that database, and that gave you your continuous learning score. And the same happened with the other 2 factors and dimensions. And then finally, your profile was compared to everyone else in the database to obtain your overall intercultural effectiveness scale. So many of the people in this database have years and years of international experience and have really worked on these things. We would expect people like that to come out in high percentages. Okay, what explains why people have low or high results? Well, in large part, it's nature versus nurture. Some people are simply born with these traits. they lucked out. And some people were born without them. Some people have lived in settings that were very diverse, and maybe they're bicultural. So they've had to grapple with this from the moment they were exposed to diversity, and they worked on these traits because they found they were necessary. Other people live in an area that is very homogeneous and have never really been exposed to great diversity. So there was really no demand for them to do this. And so they just focused their attention on something else. That's what we mean by nurture. And then finally, you have people who were maybe born with these traits, worked at them, and then had many, many years of experience where they worked on this as hard as they could. So there's no shame in the results that people have. It's just a picture of where we are. And I think it's always helpful to see where we stand compared to other people. Now, occasionally people will ask me, well, I was really depressed when I filled this out, or I was worrying about something. Would that affect my results? Well, it could. If you were very, very upset when you're filling out any kind of survey, that can impact your results. It can also impact your results if you always mark that middle thing. That's what we call central tendency bias. You always mark the middle answer, while other people are marking, I always do this. And you're always saying, well, maybe, maybe not. Of course, their results are going to be higher than you. And then another reason that sometimes explains results is that occasionally people don't take the instrument seriously when they're filling it out. They blow it off. And of course, that doesn't tell us anything. But I want you to remember that when you filled it out, these were your own self-report of how much you do these things. And so this is how you portray yourself. Every once in a while, someone will say to me, I wonder if this is accurate in a particular dimension. And so my first answer is, okay, let's look at what the definition of that dimension is. Are we sure we're defining it the same way? And then secondly, let's think about what it measured. And then thirdly, if that doesn't help explain this to you, then talk to a trusted friend who knows you well and isn't afraid to tell you that, yes, indeed, that is the way you are. This really does describe you. I have to say, though, in years and years of using the IES, it is much more common for people to say, this really is me. This really does capture things about me, some of which I was aware of and some of which I suspected were true of me. So by this point, I'd like you to open your feedback packet and look at your results. And then I want you to compare those results against your self-evaluation that you were doing when I was explaining the dimensions. How close were they? If they weren't close, why do you think that is? On the page after your results table, you will see something that looks like this. And this is where you can graph your results. What you see here is on the continuous learning axis, which is on the top, we have points that go from 1 to 7, not 1 to 6. There you would take your result on continuous learning and mark the hatch mark that's correct for you, and then do the same on hardiness and also interpersonal engagement. So this shows you how your results compare to the potential high score on everything. And on the following pages, there are also explanations of profiles that were created by combinations of high and low results on these 3 different dimensions. I would encourage you to look at the profile there that is closest to yours and see if that description gives you more insight into your scores. But remember, these profiles only measured high and low results, because if we had done all the moderate results, there would be too many permutations of that. So choose the ones that are closest to your results and see if that helps you understand even more what your results are. Here's an example of the globalist profile, someone who's high on all three dimensions. They enjoy learning, for example, they get along well with people, and they can deal with the stress of work. Now, you always want people to get the most possible out of personal development, out of an assessment like this. We want people to get the most possible out of an assessment plan like this. So that means doing a personal development plan. We've had decades of experience now working with this instrument and working with personal development plans. And I can't tell you how well this works if people take it seriously. So in your results packet, you will find a page that shows you an example personal development plan, followed by a page which you can fill out yourself on your own plan. So it has these categories. First of all, there's assessment. What is the area that you want to work on? Which dimension would you like to improve? And you've got three choices. You can either leverage it. For example, you might have an area that's very strong and you're not using it as much as you could. So you could decide ways that you could use that more. You could decide to compensate for it. Occasionally we see people who are not good at relationship development, and they have jobs that don't prevent them from working on that particular dimension. So they hire somebody who's good at it and let them work with the people side of it. So that's an example of compensating for a dimension. But you can also work to grow or develop a dimension. Now, for each of the 6 dimensions, there are suggestions about ways you can do that in your results packet. And these are not to say this is what you have to do, but they're just to prime the pump. They're to give you ideas what other people have done to either leverage, compensate for, or actually develop a dimension. I would suggest you just choose one dimension to work on. You can do others later on, but I would pick the one that is most urgent for you, that you think would make the most difference in your life or your career. Or maybe it's the one that seems like the easiest one for you to start with. So set a goal then and figure out how you're going to do this. For example, if I wanted to work on relationship development and I knew I was moving to Germany, I would probably make a plan to force myself to talk to at least 3 different people a day, to make the rounds at the office, and where appropriate, reach out and try to improve friendships and think about how to do that appropriately in Germany and how often I should be doing it. And then I would want to hold myself accountable to someone. It could be someone in Germany, it could be someone back home, it could be a professor. I have my own students email me every Monday with their progress on what they've done during the week on their personal development plans. But make sure you keep it up. And it might not work perfectly in the beginning, but stick with it and you'll find it's like anything that you're trying to exercise and develop. Eventually you get better at it, because if we focus on it and we devote time to it, we're definitely going to be able to improve ourselves. I think this relates to a lot of things. Being able to develop yourselves is important in terms of our careers. It's important in terms of being able to actually get a job. If you can explain to an employer how you developed a weakness, what was the result of that, that means that you're someone who's going to continue learning in your career, is going to continue being able to develop yourself when that's necessary. It also means that when you're working in a global context and something's not going well, that you can take the time to reflect and figure out what you need to do better and then work that plan. So I'm a strong believer in the IES. I've seen it make an enormous difference in people's lives. I've seen it make them, in general, just much more globally effective and given them great confidence. So I strongly encourage you to take advantage of this instrument. If you're going overseas in the near future, make sure that you have an action plan to work on before and while you're doing that. And I can guarantee that your experience will be the better for it. So thank you for your attention and good luck.